It may be still 4 months away, but the first shots have already been fired in the British general election campaign. So can we look forward to 4 months of mudslinging? Janan Ganesh, our chief political commentator, has been giving it some thought. Janan, is it 4 months more of this?
Well, you can tell from the early exchanges that it's going to be 4 months of pretty vicious campaigning. You've got the Conservative government trying to portray Labour as agents of chaos, economic chaos, and Labour are returning fire even more aggressively, I think, saying that the Tories will take us back to the 1930s, the era before the NHS and the welfare state, contemptuous of the poor, all the rest of it. And this is just the first few days. The campaign really began on Sunday. So 4 months of all of this stuff. And
does it work?
The argument I make in Tuesday's column is that it doesn't work. And negative campaigning can only function effectively if it is subtle and almost said more in sorrow than in anger. Tony Blair, in his memoirs, gives some examples of how he dispatched various Tory leaders by being almost bland and low-key in his criticisms.
And the best example of that being?
Well, William Hague. Lots of people in the media on the left try to portray him as, you know, a very aggressive right-winger, hostile to immigrants and all the rest of it. And Blair just said, nice guy, funny jokes, where's the judgment? And it killed him. People just saw him as an implausible prime minister. Did something similar with Michael Howard, who he called an opportunist rather than a demon, which is how many people saw him.
So let's turn to today. How do you think the American advisers that both the Tories and the Conservatives and Labour have brought on board, how are they going to have an effect?
Well, the Conservatives have got Jim Messina, Labour have got David Axelrod, both worked for Barack Obama. It's hard to know which way it will go because in 2008, Barack Obama ran a very positive campaign. In 2012, he ran a very negative campaign, essentially a hit job on Mitt Romney, one which portrayed him as a corporate fat cat. So it could go either way. The interesting factor on the Tory side is they've also got an Australian as well as an American. They've got
Linton Crosby.
Linton Crosby runs the whole operation now. He's the undisputed campaign chief. He's got a reputation in Australia when he worked for John Howard for being quite a tenacious negative campaigner.
John Howard won 3 elections in a row.
So Linton would say actually negative campaigning does work. But I think ultimately I would side with Blair, that absolutely it can work. We should not come across as naive, by the way, and pretend that negative campaigning doesn't work under any circumstances. It works when you're saying something which, in Blair's words, gets the average guy in the street, the non-politician, nodding along.
How does this affect the fact that you're likely to see a very fragmented election result, or at least that there's a fear at this point in the campaign, 4 months away, that the fringe party, so to speak, UKIP, the Liberal Democrats, or UKIP particularly, will do well?
And the Greens and the SNP.
Yeah.
I think this is absolutely linked to the negativity of electoral politics in this country. If mainstream parties accuse each other of being awful and say atrocious things about each other, then the natural response, I think, for voters is to look outside the mainstream, essentially to believe what the politicians are saying about each other, write them all off as a horrible lot, and then pursue a radical option, which might be UKIP down here, the SNP in Scotland, the Greens increasingly making incursions into the Labour vote. They have only themselves to blame, mainstream politicians. As long as they indulge in this sort of bile and negativity, voters are going to take them at their word.
Now, just the other day, a great American politician, Mario Cuomo, the several-time governor of New York, and who once toyed with being running for the presidency for the Democratic Party, he once said that you campaign in poetry and you govern in prose. So is the British general election campaign going to challenge Mr. Cuomo's, Governor Cuomo's characterisation?
At the moment, everyone is campaigning in pretty brutal bullet points, not even poetry or prose, and it makes for quite a jarring and uninspiring election campaign. I mean, I don't think the public have been engaged with the campaign so far precisely because it's so, everyone is saying exactly what you'd expect them to say. And until the campaign lifts off and enters the realms of at least prose, if not poetry, I don't think the public will switch on.
Thank you, Janan.